I have met many people who tell me a familiar sentence. I'm so lazy. They say it like a verdict, as if their life has been defined by a single word: lazy, undisciplined, not strong enough, not determined enough. But I want to ask you something. If you were truly lazy, why do you still feel uneasy every time you don't do what you should? Why is there still a small voice inside you reminding you that you could be better than this? A truly lazy person wouldn't feel anything at all, but you are different. You are restless. You are not satisfied. You don't sleep well with yourself. And that is the clearest sign that you are not lazy at all. You are just stuck in a loop you don't fully understand. Stuck between expectations and reality. Stuck in your own thoughts without knowing where the way out is. Imagine you are in a room with no windows. You walk around looking for an exit. You try to push the walls, but they don't open. You start thinking, maybe I'm not strong enough. But the truth is, it's not that you are weak. You are just pushing the wrong wall. Many people are living their entire lives like this. They try harder, but in the wrong direction. They blame themselves more, but don't understand the problem. And over time, they don't just lose motivation, they lose faith in themselves. I've been there. I used to think my problem was a lack of discipline, until I realized the problem wasn't that I didn't take action. It was that I no longer had a reason to act. In this video, I won't tell you how to work harder. I also won't talk about the cliché habits you've heard too many times. I will help you look at something deeper, the root of the stagnation you are mistakenly calling laziness. And when you understand this, you won't need to force yourself forward anymore. You will naturally want to move forward. I remember once standing in front of a group of young people, and I asked them a very simple question. Why don't you do what you know you should do? The answer came quickly. Because we're lazy. I didn't argue right away. I stayed silent for a moment, then asked, if you were truly lazy, why do you still feel guilty every night? The whole room paused. You see, a truly lazy person wouldn't feel guilty. They wouldn't care. They wouldn't think. They wouldn't struggle. But you do. You know you should start earlier. You know you should be more disciplined. You know you could become a better version of yourself. And because you know you feel the pain, that's not laziness. That's a form of internal conflict. Let me explain more clearly. Laziness is when a person has no desire. But you have desire. A lot of it. You want a better life. You want money, freedom, respect. You want to do something meaningful. But between wanting and doing, there is an invisible gap. And that gap makes you think you are lazy. I once observed a friend of mine. He had a regular office job, earning a few $100s a week. Not terrible, but not the life he wanted either. Every day, he talked about starting a small business. He had ideas, plans, even very specific numbers. But week after week, nothing changed. Finally, he said to me, maybe I'm just a lazy person. I asked him one simple question. If someone paid you $10,000 to start tomorrow, would you still be lazy? He laughed and answered immediately, no. So the problem wasn't laziness. The problem was his reason wasn't strong enough to overcome the internal resistance. Do you see this? When the reward is big enough, people can do things they once thought they had no motivation for. That proves something very important. Motivation is not something you either have or don't have. It is a response to how you perceive what you are doing. If you believe it matters, you will act. If you don't, you will procrastinate. It's that simple. But we are not taught this. We are taught that you need more discipline. You need to try harder. You need to be stronger. No one tells you that. Maybe you're not weak. Maybe you just don't see the meaning. Imagine you are rowing a boat, but you don't know where you are going. You will row for a while. Then you will slow down. Then you will stop completely. And when you look back, you will say, I'm so lazy. But the truth is, no one can sustain effort long-term without direction. I learned a very simple lesson in my life. People don't lack energy. They lack clarity. And when there is no clarity, the mind starts protecting itself. It says, later, not necessary yet. Tomorrow is fine. Not because you are weak, but because you are stuck in uncertainty. And the most dangerous thing is that you start believing the label you put on yourself. I am a lazy person. You say it enough, and then you live it out. Not because it's true, but because you believe it is. That is how a false belief becomes a real reality. I want you to pause for a moment and ask yourself, are you really lazy, or are you just in a state you don't fully understand? Because if you misunderstand the problem, you will fix it the wrong way. And if you fix it the wrong way, you will become more disappointed in yourself. But if you look at it correctly, things start to change. Not immediately, but surely. And that is where we need to go next. Because behind the label laziness, there is something deeper operating within you. Something most people never realize. And that thing is the real reason you stop. I want you to imagine something very simple. You are standing at a large intersection. There are no signs, no map, just 4 roads and they all look the same. What would you do? You might walk a bit, then stop. You might try one direction, then turn back. You might stand still for a long time without actually going anywhere. And after a few hours, a few days, you start to feel tired. Not because you've walked too much, but because you don't know where you're going. That is exactly the state many people live in every day. They wake up, they go to work, they complete necessary tasks, but inside there is no clarity, no direction that makes them feel like they are moving forward, no goal that makes each day feel meaningful. And then they wonder, why don't I have motivation? I'll tell you something few people say directly. Uncertainty is one of the heaviest burdens a person can carry. It is not loud, it is not sharply painful, but it slows you down little by little. You don't notice it immediately, but you will feel it when you delay something you know is important. When you pass by an opportunity without a clear reason. When you end a day not knowing if you truly moved forward. That's not laziness. That's your mind trying to operate in an unclear environment. Let me tell you a story. Many years ago, I met a man working in sales. He wasn't bad. In fact, he was quite decent. But he always felt like something was missing. He worked every day, but there was no excitement, no drive. And one day he said to me, I think I'm not ambitious. Maybe I'm just lazy. I asked him, do you have a clear goal for the next 5 years? He was silent. Do you know who you want to become? He shook his head. Do you know why you are doing your current job? He thought for a long time, then said, I've never really thought deeply about that. And that was the moment everything became clear. He wasn't lazy. He was just living without a direction clear enough to pull him forward. Do you see this? People don't need to be forced to act. They just need a direction that is clear and meaningful enough. When you know where you are going, you don't need anyone to remind you to try. You will do it yourself. But when you don't know, every action becomes heavy. Even the smallest tasks become burdens. That's why there are days when you open your computer, look at your work, and can't start. Not because you lack ability, but because you don't see the bigger picture. You don't see where this is leading. And when the mind doesn't see meaning, it chooses to conserve energy. It says, later. Not because you are weak, but because you are stuck in a fog that you don't realize. The most dangerous thing about uncertainty is that it doesn't stop you immediately. It slows you down gradually. You still live, you still work, you still exist, but you don't truly move forward. And over time, you start to believe the problem is within you. I'm not good enough. I'm not disciplined enough. I'm not strong enough. But the truth is, you don't lack ability. You just lack clarity. And when you lack clarity, everything becomes heavier than it needs to be. I have learned that if you want to change your life, don't start by trying harder. Start by understanding more clearly. Understand where you are going. Understand why you are going. Because when you have that, motivation will no longer be a problem. But there is something even deeper than uncertainty. Something that even when you know what you want, can still keep you standing still. Something quieter, more dangerous. And most people have never called it by its real name. I want you to recall a time in your life when you were truly excited about something. Maybe an idea, a goal, or simply the feeling that you were moving forward. On those days, you didn't need anyone to push you. You woke up earlier. You did more. You didn't even feel tired. Not because you had more energy than others, but because you had a reason. Now think about other days. Days when you know you should work, but you procrastinate. You open your phone. You check something unimportant. You tell yourself, just 5 minutes, and then an hour passes. How do you feel after that? Not rested, but a heavy feeling hard to name. You start blaming yourself. You call yourself lazy. But I want you to look closely. Those two states are not different because of who you are. They differ in one thing only, whether you have a purpose or not. When purpose is clear, energy appears. When purpose disappears, energy disappears with it. That is not random. That is how the human mind is designed. Let me tell you a story. There was a young man I once met. He worked 2 different jobs at 2 stages of his life. In the first job, he worked for money, just for money. He arrived on time. He did what was required, but nothing more. No enthusiasm, no initiative. Every day passed exactly like the day before. And he thought, I'm not the type of person with motivation. But then he switched to another job. This time, it wasn't just about money. He believed the work had meaning. He saw himself building something. He saw his future in it. And suddenly the same person worked twice as much, stayed later, took more initiative, even felt happier. No one forced him, no one reminded him. He did it himself. So what changed? Not ability, not personality, just purpose. Do you see this? People don't lack energy. They just lack a reason strong enough to awaken that energy. When you don't see meaning in what you do, your mind will resist. Not by saying, I won't do it, but through procrastination, distraction, lack of focus. It's very subtle. You still sit there. You still try. But deep inside, you are not really there. And then you think, I'm so lazy. No, you are just doing something your mind does not believe is worth doing. I have learned something very important. Motivation does not come from forcing yourself. It comes from connecting yourself to a meaningful goal. If you constantly have to force yourself to do something, there are two possibilities. Either you are not clear enough about the goal, or that goal is not truly yours. And both lead to the same result. You feel exhausted before you even begin. That's why some people can work 12 hours a day and still feel full of energy, while others, after just 2 hours, want to give up. Not because they are stronger, but because they have a fire inside, a reason that won't let them stop. And if you don't have that, you will always feel like you are dragging something heavy behind you. You will call it lack of motivation, but in reality, it is the lack of connection between you and what you are doing. I want you to pause for a moment and ask yourself a very simple question. What you are doing every day, is it truly leading you to where you want to go? Or are you just moving because you have never stopped to choose a direction? Because if you don't choose, life will choose for you. And usually, it won't choose what is best for you. But even when you start to find your purpose, there is still one more thing, something very easy to mislead you, making you believe you are tired when the truth is completely different. I used to believe I was tired. There were days when I sat at my desk, looking at the things I needed to do, and felt a heaviness I couldn't explain. I thought, maybe I need to rest, and I rested. 1 hour, 2 hours, then the whole day. But the strange thing was, after resting, I still didn't want to go back. No energy, no interest, no drive. And I called that state tired. But then, on another day, I received an opportunity, an idea, something that truly interested me. And suddenly, I could work for hours straight. No need to rest, no need to force myself, no need for external motivation. So, was I tired or not? If I was truly tired, why could I work non-stop when I encountered something I cared about? The answer is very simple. I wasn't tired. I was just lacking inspiration. And many people are confusing these two things. They think they need rest, when what they really need is a reason to start. You see this in everyday life. A person may say they are too tired to work, but can watch movies for hours. They say they have no energy, but can talk, browse the web, or do unimportant things for a long time. That is not fatigue. That is disconnection. When you are not inspired, everything becomes heavy. Even the simplest task becomes a burden. But when you are inspired, the hardest tasks become light. I remember a friend of mine. He once said he didn't have the energy to study after work. But then one day he became interested in a new field. No one forced him. No one required it. It was just interesting to him. And from that point on, he could sit for hours every evening, studying, reading, researching, without feeling tired at all. Do you see what changed? Not time, not circumstances, just inspiration. That's why I always say, if you feel like you are always tired, pause and ask yourself, why am I doing this? Because if the answer is not clear or not strong enough, you will always feel like you are dragging a heavy cart uphill. You can do it, but you will burn out very quickly. And then you will blame yourself. Why am I so weak? Why don't I have discipline? No, you are not weak. You are just trying to sustain energy without a source. Inspiration is that source of energy. It is not something superficial, not something only for lucky people. It is a necessary element for sustaining long-term action. But there is something more dangerous than lacking inspiration. It is when you repeat the same life every day without realizing that you are slowly losing yourself. I want you to look back at a normal day in your life. You wake up at a familiar time. You do familiar things. You meet familiar people. And at the end of the day, if I ask you, did you get closer to the life you want today? How would you answer? Many people don't have an answer, not because they did nothing. They did a lot. But the problem is, what they did today is no different from yesterday, and tomorrow will likely be the same. That is a very subtle trap. You are not completely standing still. You are still moving, but you are moving in a circle, like a car driving on a closed track. It can go very fast, but no matter how fast, it returns to the starting point. I once lived in a phase like that. Every day I worked hard. I completed tasks. I wasn't lazy, but deep inside, I knew something was wrong. I wasn't moving forward. I was just repeating. And the scariest thing is that you can live many years in that state without realizing it. Because on the outside, everything looks fine. You have income, you have a schedule, you have a stable life. But inside, there is a very subtle feeling that you are missing something, a feeling hard to name. You can't point to exactly what it is, but you know, life is supposed to be more than this. That is not ambition. That is human instinct, to grow, to move forward, to become a better version of yourself. When you don't have progress, your mind begins to resist. But it doesn't shout, it whispers. It makes you lose focus. It makes you procrastinate. It makes you feel like you don't want to do anything, and you call that laziness. But in reality, that is a natural response of a human being who is stuck in meaningless repetition. Let me tell you a story. There was a man who worked at a company for many years. Every day of his was almost identical. He did his job well, no major problems, but no change either. One day he said to me, "I don't have motivation anymore. Maybe I'm becoming lazy as I get older." I asked him a very simple question. "In the past 5 years, how has your life changed?" He thought for a long time, then answered, "Not much." That was the answer. He wasn't lazy. He was just living in a loop without clear progress. And when people don't see themselves moving forward, they begin to lose energy. They begin to doubt themselves. They begin to believe the problem is within them. But the truth is, no one can sustain long-term motivation when they don't see results from their effort. You can endure for a while, but not forever. That's why many people don't quit immediately. They just slow down, then slower. Then one day, they no longer want to start, and they call that laziness. But no, they are just exhausted from running too long without going anywhere. I have learned something very important. People don't need more. They just need to see that what they do today is bringing them closer to where they want to go. Just a little progress, a sign, a piece of evidence that they are not standing still. When you have that, you won't need anyone to push you anymore. You will continue on your own. But if you don't, everything will gradually become heavier, and you will return to the familiar sentence, "I'm so lazy." But the story doesn't end there, because sometimes you don't move forward, not because you don't want to, but because there is something else, something very subtle, holding you back from within. I want you to be honest with yourself just for a moment. How many times have you delayed something important, not because you didn't know what to do, but because you weren't sure you would do it well? You don't start, not because you can't, but because you don't want to face the possibility that you might fail. And then you say a very familiar sentence, "I'll do it tomorrow." It sounds gentle, it sounds harmless, but behind it is something very powerful. Fear. Not a big, obvious fear, but a very subtle one. Fear that you are not good enough. Fear of being judged. Fear of proving that the doubts in your head are right. And the interesting thing is, your mind doesn't say, "I am afraid." It says, "I'm not ready yet. I need more time. I don't have motivation today." It sounds reasonable, but if you look closely, they are just different ways to avoid starting. I have been in that state many times. There were opportunities. I clearly knew that if I took them, my life could change. But I hesitated. I overthought. I prepared for too long. I waited for the perfect moment, and then I did nothing. After that, I looked back and called myself lazy. But deep inside, I knew the truth. I wasn't lazy. I was afraid. Afraid that I wouldn't be good enough. Afraid that I would fail. Afraid that I would have to face a version of myself that I didn't want to see. Do you see this? Fear does not always appear like a storm. It often shows up as an excuse, a reason that sounds reasonable, so you don't have to act. And if you don't realize that, you will continue living in the loop. You procrastinate, you blame yourself, you call yourself lazy, and then procrastinate again. That is not a discipline problem. It is a problem of trying to escape a feeling you don't want to face. Let me ask you a very simple question. If you knew for sure that you would succeed, would you still procrastinate? Most people would say no. What does that mean? It means the problem is not action. It is what you believe will happen after you act. If you believe you will fail, you will avoid starting. If you believe you will be judged, you will hold yourself back. And all of that is very cleverly disguised under the name laziness. I learned something I wish I had understood earlier. You cannot overcome procrastination if you don't face the fear behind it. You can force yourself to work for a few days, but if the fear is still there, you will return to the same place, always. Because the human mind will always choose safety over what is right, even if that safety keeps you stuck for years. But here is what matters. Fear does not disappear when you think more. It does not disappear when you wait. It only disappears when you take action even when you are not ready. When you take a small step and realize that things are not as scary as you thought. That is when you begin to break the loop, not with strength, not with discipline, but with small courage, repeated every day. But even when you overcome fear, there is still something else, something even more dangerous, because it doesn't hurt you immediately. It just keeps you exactly where you are. I want you to imagine a cage, not a cage made of iron, no bars, no locks. This cage is very comfortable. Inside it, there is everything you need to live. There is safety. There is familiarity. There is a feeling that nothing dangerous will happen. And because of that, you don't leave. You are not trapped. You choose to stay. That is the most dangerous thing about the comfort zone. It doesn't hurt you. It doesn't scare you. It just keeps you from growing. I have been in a cage like that. Everything in my life was fine, not too bad, not too stressful, no major risks, but no significant progress either. I didn't fail, but I didn't move forward either. And the scary thing is, that state is very comfortable. You have no clear reason to change, no pressure strong enough to force you to step out. And so you stay, day after day. You start getting used to it. You start accepting it. And then you start protecting it. You tell yourself, this is fine. At least I'm not taking risks. I'll wait until I'm more ready. Those statements sound reasonable, but in reality, they are how you build walls around yourself. Do you see this? People are not always held back by fear. Sometimes they are held back by comfort, because comfort doesn't demand anything from you. It doesn't require you to change. It doesn't force you to face difficult things. It only asks you to stay still, and you pay for that with stagnation. Let me tell you a story. There was a man who worked in a stable position for many years. His income was enough to live. The job was not too stressful. Everything was fine, but deep inside, he knew he could do more. He had ability. He had ideas. He had opportunities, but he didn't act. Why? Because he wasn't uncomfortable enough with his current life to force himself to change. He wasn't pushed out of the cage, and so he stayed. Many years passed, not because he couldn't leave, but because he never truly decided to leave. That is how the comfort zone holds you back, not with force, but with ease. You don't notice it immediately, but if you look back after 5 years and your life has barely changed, then very likely you are in a cage like that. And the most dangerous thing is that you start believing that this is all you can achieve. You lower your standards. You adjust your dreams. You accept less, not because you want to, but because you have gotten used to not asking for more. I have learned something very important. Comfort is a trap, not because it is bad, but because it makes you forget who you could become. If you don't actively step out, you will stay there for a long time, not because you are weak, but because you don't see a reason strong enough to leave. But life is not a place to stay still. It is a place to grow. And if you don't grow, you are not standing still. You are falling behind. But there is something even deeper than the comfort zone. Something that doesn't exist outside of you, but exists in how you see yourself. Something that can hold you back, even after you have left the cage. I want you to remember a sentence that you may have said about yourself. I'm not a disciplined person. I'm not good at that. I don't have the talent. Sound familiar? These sentences are often said very casually, as an explanation, as a form of acceptance. But do you know, they are not harmless statements. They are verdicts, not given by someone else, but by you to yourself. I have done that before. There was a time I believed I was not someone who could succeed in business. I said that to others. I said that to myself. And then I began to live exactly as I believed. I didn't try big opportunities. I didn't take risks. I didn't set high standards for myself. Not because I couldn't, but because I had already decided that was not who I was. Do you see this? Identity is not something you are born with. It is something you build based on what you believe about yourself. And the most dangerous thing is when you build it too early, before you have truly tried, truly experienced, truly understood what you are capable of. But you have already concluded, this is who I am. And from that moment, all your actions begin to align with that identity. If you believe you are not disciplined, you will not act like a disciplined person. If you believe you are not capable, you will not dare to try difficult things. Not because you lack ability, but because you don't allow yourself the chance. I have met many people. They don't lack opportunities. They don't lack talent, but they are limited by a story they tell about themselves. A story that started a long time ago. Maybe from a failure, maybe from someone else's comment, maybe from an experience they never moved past. And they keep it. They carry it for years. And then they call it personality. But the truth is, it is just a belief they have never questioned. Let me ask you something very simple. Who told you that you are that kind of person? And why did you believe it? Because if you look closely, you will realize that many things you believe about yourself are not facts, just quick conclusions, repeated long enough to become truth in your mind. I have learned something very important. You don't act based on your ability. You act based on your identity. If you believe you are disciplined, you will find ways to act. If you believe you are not, you will find reasons not to. And all of that happens very naturally. No forcing, no overthinking, just living in alignment with who you believe you are. That is why changing actions alone is not enough. You can try for a few days. You can force yourself for a while. But if your identity doesn't change, you will return to the same place, always. Because deep inside, you still believe that is who you are. And humans always act to protect the image they have of themselves. But if identity can hold you back, it can also set you free. You just need to be willing to ask again, who am I really? Not who you used to be, not who others say you are, but who you choose to become from today. And when you begin to change that, you will realize that there are many things in your life that don't need to become bigger. They just need to be seen. I want to ask you a very simple question. When was the last time you felt proud of a small improvement you made? Not a big success, not a huge leap, just a small step forward. Something you did better than yesterday. A habit you maintained one more day. A right decision, even if no one saw it. Do you remember? Or have you stopped noticing them a long time ago? There is something very interesting about humans. We always want big results. We want to see clear change. We want the feeling that we've come far. But when those things haven't happened yet, we start thinking we are not progressing. And when you believe you are not progressing, you lose motivation. Not because you did nothing, but because you don't see the value of what you have done. I have been in that state. There were periods in my life when I worked every day, didn't quit, didn't stop, but I didn't feel like I was moving forward. And then I started losing motivation, not because I didn't try, but because I didn't see results big enough to prove that my efforts mattered. Until one day, I started looking at very small things. I realized that I had read more than before. I had thought differently than before. I had responded better in situations where I used to fail. Small changes that I had never acknowledged. And when I started seeing them, something strange happened. I felt motivated again. Not because my life changed overnight, but because I realized I was changing little by little. Do you see this? People don't need to see big success to keep going. They just need to see that they are not standing still. But if you ignore small wins, your mind will conclude nothing is changing. And when you believe that, you will start slowing down. You will ask yourself, why should I try if there are no results? That is how you lose motivation. Not because you are not progressing, but because you don't see your progress. Let me tell you a story. There was a person who started saving money every week, just a very small amount, not significant, not making a big difference immediately. After a few months, he looked at that amount and felt disappointed. Is that all? He thought his efforts were meaningless, and he stopped. But if he had continued, if he had understood that small numbers become something big over time, his life could have been different. That is how many people lose their progress, not because they lack ability, but because they are not patient enough to see the value of small steps. I have learned something very important. Life doesn't change in a day. It changes through small decisions, through small actions, through choices you repeat every day. And if you don't learn to appreciate those things, you will always feel like you are staying in the same place, even when you are not. I want you to try something very simple. At the end of each day, don't ask, "What big thing did I accomplish today?" Ask, "Did I move forward even a little today?" And if the answer is yes, acknowledge it. No need for anyone else to recognize it. No need for praise. Just you seeing that you are moving in the right direction. Because when you see that, you will no longer feel stuck. You will see that you are moving. But sometimes, even when you try, even when you improve, there is still something that pulls you back. Not from within, but from what surrounds you every day. I want you to look around, not at your work, not at your goals, but at the people around you. Who do you spend time with? What do you hear every day? What standards are influencing you? Because whether you realize it or not, your environment is shaping you little by little. Many people think that they are stuck because they lack motivation. But in reality, they are being held back by what they are exposed to every day. Let me explain. If you are in an environment where people don't set high goals, people don't grow, people accept mediocrity, then what happens? You will start to think this is normal. You will adjust your standards without realizing it. You will no longer feel urgency. You will no longer feel the need to move forward. And gradually, you will become part of that environment. Not because you want to, but because it is natural. I have been in an environment like that. No one says you can't succeed, but no one truly tries to succeed either. No one tells you to stop, but no one is really moving forward. Everything is just good enough. And in an environment like that, it is very hard to become exceptional. Not because you lack ability, but because there is nothing around you pushing you beyond your limits. I remember a time when I started changing my environment. I began meeting people with higher standards. I started hearing different conversations. I exposed myself to bigger ideas. And the strange thing was, I didn't need to force myself to change. I changed naturally. I started thinking differently. I started acting differently. I started setting standards I had never considered before. Why? Because my environment changed. Do you see this? You cannot become a bigger version of yourself if you stay in an environment that keeps you small. Not because that environment is bad, but because it doesn't match the person you want to become. That's why, if you always feel like you lack motivation, pause and ask yourself, is my environment supporting my growth, or is it making you comfortable with standing still? Because if you don't change your environment, you will have to fight against it every day, and that is a very hard battle to win. I have learned something very simple. You don't need to be stronger than everything around you. You just need to place yourself in an environment where moving forward becomes natural, where high standards are normal, where growth is expected. When you have that, you will no longer feel like you are being pulled back. You will be pushed forward. But even when you change your environment, even when you start seeing new opportunities, there is still something that makes many people wait. They think that they need to be clearer, they need to be more ready before they start stuck. But that is exactly what keeps them stuck, keeps them there. Here's a particular now. They think that they need to be buried defense, but they think that they will need to be wait before they need to be saying. They think again they could get out, you think. They think that they will need to be wait, but they think that the burst thing to be wait. They think that they will need to be buried defense before they need to be more. But that is exactly what keeps them. It's not the buried defense, but that is exactly what keeps them stuck. Here's a life. They think that many people would its way if you work. But that is exactly what keeps them stuck. As that is a stately that they give them. If that is a very before, here's the word. They think that they need to be buried defense. But that is exactly what keeps them stuck. Here's the word. They think that they will need to be wait, but they think that the individual. But that is exactly what keeps them stuck. One hymn. What the words of impersony, what the words of the next visual. But that is exactly what keeps them stuck. There's more what? keeps them stuck the longest. I used to believe that. I needed clarity before I started. I thought that I needed a perfect plan, a certain direction, a guarantee that everything would be fine. Then I would act. It sounds reasonable, right? But the problem is, the clarity I was waiting for never came. I thought, I analyzed, I prepared, but the more I thought, the more confused I became. The more I waited, the more I stood still. And then I realized something very simple, but it completely changed how I saw life. Clarity does not come before action, it comes after action. Imagine you are driving at night. Your headlights only illuminate a short distance ahead. You cannot see the entire journey. You don't know every turn, but you can still move, because every time you move forward a little, more of the road appears. Life is the same. You don't need to see the whole path to begin. You just need to see enough to take the first step. I have met many people. They say, I'm not sure what I want yet. I'm not sure if this is the right path. I need more time to think. And they wait. They wait until everything becomes clear. But what they don't realize is the clarity they are looking for only appears when they start acting. You cannot understand a path just by standing and looking at it. You have to walk it. You have to experience it. You have to try. You have to fail. Only then will you know what fits and what doesn't. I spent a lot of time trying to find the right choice. I wanted certainty. I wanted to avoid mistakes. But in the end, I realized that no choice is perfect from the start. Every choice becomes right or wrong based on what you do after it. Do you see this? You are not stuck because you don't know what to do. You are stuck because you are waiting for certainty that only action can bring. And while you wait, time keeps passing. Opportunities keep passing, and you remain still. Not because you are lazy, but because you are demanding something unrealistic. Perfect clarity before starting. I have learned something very important. Small action is more valuable than hours of thinking. One step forward, even if imperfect, is better than standing still with a perfect plan in your head. Because when you act, you learn. When you learn, you adjust. And when you adjust, you move closer to what you truly want. That is how life works, not through certainty, but through movement. I want you to remember this. You don't need to know everything. You just need to start. And when you start, everything will gradually become clearer. Not immediately, but enough for you to continue. And when you continue, you will realize something you have never seen before. A very important truth, that from the very beginning, the problem was never that you were lazy. I want you to pause for a moment and look back at the entire journey we have just gone through. You once thought you were lazy. You blamed yourself. You believed the problem was discipline, willpower yourself. But now, look again slowly. Are you really lazy? Or were you stuck in uncertainty, not knowing where you were going? Or disconnected from your purpose, so you had no energy to continue? Or confusing fatigue with a lack of inspiration? Or living in a loop without clear progress? Or held back by fear, disguised as reasonable excuses? Or staying in a comfortable cage where nothing hurts but nothing grows? Or accepting an identity too early, too small compared to who you could become? Or ignoring small progress and therefore believing you were not improving? Or staying in an environment that didn't demand you to become better? Or waiting for clarity when all you needed was to start? Do you see this? None of those things have anything to do with laziness. They are just misalignments. You are not broken. You are just off track. And when you are off track, everything becomes difficult. You have to force yourself. You have to struggle. You have to drag yourself forward every day. But when you are on the right path, everything changes. You don't need to force yourself as much. You don't need to fight yourself. You begin to feel like you are being pulled forward. That is the difference between a misaligned life and an aligned one. I have learned that success does not come from becoming a perfect person. It comes from placing yourself in the right position, doing the right thing, and connecting deeply with it. When you have that, discipline is no longer a burden. It becomes a natural part of you. You don't have to force yourself to wake up early. You want to wake up early. You don't have to force yourself to work. You want to work. It's not always easy, but it has meaning. And that meaning keeps you going. I'm not saying everything will become perfect. Life will always have difficulties, always have challenges. But when you are no longer fighting yourself, you can use all your energy to face the world, and that is a huge advantage. I want you to remember this. You were never lazy. You were just in the wrong place, doing the wrong thing, or believing the wrong things about yourself. And the good news is, all of those things can change, not in a day, but starting from one very small decision. The decision to look again, the decision to understand correctly, the decision to start even if it's not perfect. And when you do that, you will realize that life is not against you. It is just waiting for you to move in the right direction. I want you to remember something very simple. All this time, you have been carrying a label on yourself, lazy. You used it to explain everything. You used it to blame yourself. You used it to accept staying still. But now, you see more clearly. You are not lazy. You have just been unclear about your direction, been disconnected from your purpose, lacked inspiration, been stuck in repetition, been held back by fear, stayed too long in your comfort zone, believed in an identity that is too small, ignored small progress, been influenced by your environment, and waited for clarity instead of starting. All of those things are not your nature. They are just layers of dust covering who you really are. And the best part is, you don't need to become a new person. You just need to remove what isn't true. When you understand that, everything starts to change. You stop fighting yourself. You start working with yourself. You stop forcing yourself forward. You begin to be pulled forward by meaning. You stop asking, why am I like this? You start asking, what do I need to adjust to move in the right direction? That is the biggest shift, not in your actions, but in how you see yourself. Because when you change how you see, you change your decisions, you change your actions, and eventually, you change your life. I want to leave you with one question. If you no longer believe you are lazy, what would you start tomorrow? Leave your answer below. I want to hear it. And if this video helped you see yourself more clearly, hit like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might be blaming themselves just like you once did. Because sometimes, what a person needs most is not motivation, but the right perspective. And as I have always believed, success is not something you chase. It is something you attract by becoming the right person. I truly appreciate you staying until the end of this video.